Okay, guys. All right, it looks like I'm live, so I wanted to post this video as a brief um, uh, little discussion about audio and microphones and whatnot, because it came up yesterday in the live stream, and um, I don't yet have specific recommendations, but I want to share a couple ideas and principles that I think might be helpful. I'm actually posting this specifically for someone, had nothing to do with yesterday's live stream, but somebody out of the blue. It's kind of a weird coincidence. We had this discussion about audio and microphones yesterday. Good morning, Dominic. So we had this discussion about audio and microphones yesterday, and then out of the blue the next day, I get an email from someone who I respect, and a fairly notable someone who has questions about audio for live streaming and all this. You know, it's kind of weird that it came up twice in less than a 24-hour period of time. Okay, so I want to just show you guys a couple things. Yesterday, when Amar posted a couple samples of a blue microphone. Hey, Maria. Amar posted audio samples yesterday. Okay, I was a little jolted by the fact that the audio wasn't as crisp and clean as what I expected. It's not that it's not possible with the microphone he has. I don't know, because I don't have the same microphone he has. But I want to show you guys a little bit about this in a way that might help give you guys a little bit of a framework for what you're looking for. Step one, let's look at this. I pulled up Lex Friedman's podcast. I like Lex. He's a great guy. And if you look at what he's doing here,
I think the engineering that they've done is actually pretty cool. So I like the
robots.
Yeah, from the design perspective.
Okay, what do we see? This is, of course, his guest. So let's come back here and you can listen to Lex actually on the microphone.
Well, there's this interactive element, like where you can cause stuff that's really powerful, because you get to.
Okay, you see what he's doing? So he's got the microphone pointed essentially at his chin, which is probably wise. It's pointed up at his chin in order to minimize the chance of getting any pee-pops. Okay, so what are pee-pops? Pee-pops are that. You don't want air hitting the membrane of the microphone sensor, because if it does, you're going to get what's called a plosive in the professional audio world, also known colloquially as pee-pops. So that's why he's got it pointed probably at his chin, and he's basically talking past the microphone. That's important. Number two, have no illusions about it. There's a reason why these podcasters are literally 2 to 3 inches away from the microphone. Okay? If you want to get good, clean audio, you have to be close to the mic. Now, you can mitigate that a little bit by being in a very, very well padded room, so you don't get any reflections in the room. It may surprise you to know that if you've got a room or a house with a lot of hard surfaces that's a little echoey and you're having trouble getting good quality audio, and you've got the means to do it, consider going and sitting in your vehicle, to record audio. But it's still going to be important that the microphone is real close to your mouth like this, and you have an additional problem in a small space like a vehicle, because you actually have, even if it's a very soft surface area, which a vehicle is, because obviously typically all the seats are soft, right? So there's absorbent surfaces, and but the problems you have with audio are, number one, reflections, okay, and then you can again mitigate that with padding. Number two, the dimensions of the room itself. If you're in a closet, like the idea of a vocal booth in the old days, so we go into the sound booth to record audio. Well, the sound booth might be pretty small. Like it might be 2 or 3 feet square kind of thing, right? So it's like going into a closet. Now, the thing you got to realize is that even in that environment, the whole point is probably to have the padding on the walls, not the smallness of the room, because the smallness of the room actually means that you're going to introduce even more very, very short reflections. And those short reflections can become very, very egregious. It would be like thinking about recording audio in a bathroom. Not a great idea unless you want that sound. If I don't have to get very far away from this microphone for you guys to start hearing the room. okay? I don't have to get very far away at all. So by far, no matter what your environment you're recording in, there's no question that the most important thing is to talk past the microphone so you don't get plosives and to be as close as reasonably possible, okay? All right, so Dominic says they use dynamic mics. They only pick up near sounds. If you have a condenser, you would have it. Dominic, that's really not completely right. The thing you got to realize in a professional setting, you're going to, it's highly likely that you're going to be using things like noise gates. Obviously in post-production, I'll show this in a minute, but you can use noise reduction to mitigate noise. So there's the problem of noise in your signal, and then there's the problem of reflections. But what Dominic just said, just so you guys know, is wrong. Okay, Dominic's kind of spitballing here, and that's fine, but that's not really good information. A dynamic mic and a condenser mic are fundamentally different. Okay, a dynamic mic is a mechanical device that's responding to movements of the sound waves in the air. A condenser is a fundamentally different little piece of technology, and it uses an electrically charged plate situation that is enormously more sensitive to sound. So hence, on the one hand, with a condenser microphone, you typically need it to be a powered microphone. A dynamic microphone doesn't. What do you get with a condenser microphone that's better? Well, what you actually get is transient response. Okay, transient response is that the membrane in the microphone, in a dynamic microphone, physically cannot move as quickly as a condenser responds to sound. Okay, so what that means is that in practice, if in the frequencies above, say, 8,000 hertz, a condenser microphone is typically going to be more sensitive. That's why in a studio environment, you're using, a $2,000 or $3,000 Neumann microphone to record, whoever, Taylor Swift's latest song. She may be using a Neumann microphone. And it's a condenser mic. It's got better transient response, which means that the audiophiles in the audience are going to appreciate the fact that it's more sensitive in the highest frequencies. You got to realize that for a podcast, for everything we're talking about, and including a show like Salt and Light, where you're dealing with dialogue in a program, okay? None of that matters. Why? Because basically, the frequencies above 8K just don't actually matter that much. Okay, well, yeah, the U87, exactly. The Neumann that's a classic, and you're going to pay a pretty penny for it. And then the logical question becomes, how much do you gain by having the Neumann versus the cheapo mics? These mics here, I don't know what Lex is using. If he's spending a little more money, they could be EVs. It doesn't really look like it. The microphones that are typically used in radio stations are these EVs that they kind of look like this cup I drink out of, or they look like an Amazon Echo device. They're basically a beer can type cylinder about 2 inches across, and the construction of the mics are such that the radio guys can get real close like this and they can talk right into the microphone, and they don't get plosives. But you got to remember, they also typically have a P-pop filter around the microphone, a foam filter, just like the one I use. It's foam, but the foam ones in the radio stations are typically about 6-8 inches across. I mean, it's a really, really fat foam screen. Okay, so the SM7, I don't know about the SM7 or 7B specifically. What I have personally is an SM58. I don't really use 57s. They're traditionally for you use them on drums and sometimes guitar amps because you pretty much can't, you can't clip the mic. It's a really, really, really forgiving microphone in terms of high sound pressure levels, okay? Whereas the 58 is more, it's traditionally a workhorse microphone for live performance for vocals. It has a better frequency response for vocals typically, and it's also a real rugged mic. Okay, that's the 7B. Okay, thank you, Dominic, for pointing that out. So that's what they're using in the podcast is a Shure SM7B. Okay, fine. I'm going to look up the SM7B on Amazon right now. I'm guessing it's probably about a $200 microphone. Oh, no. That's about a $400 microphone. Okay, yeah, and that definitely looks very similar to the EVs they use in the radio stations. Okay, so anyway, the question one must ask oneself then is, does having the $400 microphone like Lex is using, does it matter? I will say that probably the multipolar pattern microphones like Amar used in the sample he posted yesterday, there might be some trickery going on. This is completely speculation, but my speculation is this: when they're trying to sell a cheaper microphone, probably what happens is mechanically, well, the pickup pattern is invariably cardioid. It's probably not hypercardioid. The microphone I'm using right now, which is a shotgun, is hypercardioid. Okay? And I'll get into the difference between hypercardioid and cardioid and why you might not want a hypercardioid microphone, even though it's going to pick up less of the room. Okay? Because it's got a polar pattern that really hears sound right in front of itself. There's a microphone by Rode that in professional circles for film work is probably the most popular shotgun mic. And then the Shure has a shotgun mic. It's about $1,000 microphone that's also extremely popular for film work and that type of thing. Okay, so let's look at it this way. All right, we're going to listen to Lex for a minute.
I mean, as opposed to collecting data passively, you're collecting data actively. So can you maybe describe?
Okay, so you can see that's a very full, round kind of sound. Okay, well, if I record with this shotgun mic, this microphone that I'm using actually has two different settings. Okay, it's got a hypercardioid shotgun pattern, and it's also got a standard cardioid pattern. And the trade-off is kind of interesting. The interesting thing is, here's the shotgun that you're hearing right now. Check, check, check. Okay, this is recording the shotgun setting. Okay, so you can hear that compared to Lex, it sounds what you might call boxy, a little bit thin. You can compensate for that with EQ. If you switch this microphone between the two settings, then you get this sound. Okay, the output's quite a bit lower, but if I get a little closer on the mic, I should have a more well. Okay, so now this sound.
One of the many things you're known for, one of the big things is called
volume.
optogenetics. What is it?
Okay, so you can hear a little more bottom in
Mic,
his
I
microphone.
should have a more.
But if I turn on, actually I'm just adding my BBE process. It's going to enhance the even order harmonics of the signal, and it's also going to enhance the low end a little bit. And then you get this.
Quite a bit lower, but if I get a little closer on the mic, I should have a more well-rounded sound.
Okay, well, magic, lo and behold, that sounds pretty darn close to the type of frequency response you're getting from his $400 microphone. His $400 microphone, my $30 microphone. Okay, the reality is that the difference between the right $30 microphone and a $300 or a $3,000 microphone is a difference that usually only matters in the most pristine, exacting professional circumstances, which most production isn't. In fact, it's actually, I mean, there's plenty of hit records that have been recorded with SM58s or even 57s, right? And you're correct, Dominic, exactly right. It's a warm sound. But if you want to have a warm sound, that's easy to achieve. You can punch the bass up even more here, and the most simple and obvious EQ situation to achieve that is to really just kind of focus around 1,000 hertz like this and have a very wide bandwidth and just pull some sound out, okay, in the center of the range, okay?
Okay, the output's quite a bit lower, but if I get a little closer on the mic, I should have a more well-rounded sound EQ-wise.
Okay, for a vocal sound that punches through a mix in a movie, that is 100% the opposite of what you want. When I'm using this shotgun mic, it actually enhances the frequencies around 1,000 hertz. I'll turn the BBE off, and then let's do it this way. Let's turn off this band. I'm just going to remove. Actually, let's just remove all the bands, and then let's change this to a bandpass EQ filter, if you will. Let's make the bandwidth of it as wide as possible, and actually let's center it around 600 hertz. Okay, so you're getting some change around 1,000 hertz, but basically what I found is 600 is pretty good. So now listen to this. Okay, the output's quite a bit lower, but if I get a little closer on the mic, I should have them. Okay, it's probably not exact, but you'll probably find that what you're hearing right now in the recording of the good quality audio sounds kind of similar to what you're hearing all the time from this microphone, which is right now in the shotgun position. Okay, if you're podcasting, the warm sound is probably better. If you're doing a show or a movie, this sound is better. Okay, the output's... The magical thing about a shotgun mic is that what you get out of it directly, like what you're hearing from me right now, when you mix it into a show with sound effects and music and everything else, turns out it actually sits in the mix really, really nicely. And I mentioned yesterday, if you watch a show or a cartoon where they've recorded the voices in a really pristine environment, but they're not EQing it to sit in the mix in that sort of film mix way that I'm describing, what you find is it sounds too realistic. It really jumps out at you, and it's almost a little jolting, right? Now, this is all matter of taste for the most part. If you want a somewhat warm sound, then you can just enhance the bottom. Okay, the output's quite a bit lower, but if I get a little closer on the mic, that basically sounds like a podcast. Now, what is significant about this recording? I wanted to test if I take my $30 Chinese shotgun microphone and I use the center position, so I'm not getting the shotgun sound and I'm not getting the shotgun polar rejection. Okay, so polar rejection meaning that the polar pattern is so narrow that this microphone hears very well right in front of itself. And you guys can't see this right now, but let me try to... So I'll stick it up here. But if you get off to the side, not even very much at all, it really starts cutting the sound out. Like it's a big change when you get off to the side. Okay, an omnidirectional microphone actually picks up the same sound all around the microphone, and you might think that's a good thing, but it's not. Why? Because if I'm on one side of the microphone, then the microphone with an omnipolar pattern is picking up the reflections on the other side of the mic. The reflections bouncing off the wall, okay? So the Rode NT, so Dominic's showing us that he my criticism there earlier about the condenser versus the, so Dominic's showing me that he does in fact kind of know what he's talking about actually, because if he's using a Rode NT1, that's a pretty good choice. The compressor, Lex's audio might have compression on it. If it is, it's not very strong.
Optogenetics is a way of
Probably not. It doesn't sound like those guys have much compression on their sound. But let me get back to what I was saying. What I wanted to test here was if I take this $30 microphone and use the center position so that it has more accurate audio reproduction, does the lower output introduce noise? Because the output in the shotgun setting is quite a bit hotter than the output in the normal cardioid pattern that has a more true frequency response. Make no mistake about it. I have compared my $30 shotgun mic in the center position, the cardioid position, not what you're hearing right now, which is a little boxier sounding, a little more 1,000 1 kilohertz frequency response. When I've compared the $30 shotgun to my $400 or $500 Audio-Technica 4041, which has a flat as a pancake frequency response, it's a true studio condenser microphone. Basically, there really isn't much difference. There basically is not much difference. So the thing I was concerned about here is noise. Are we going to have noise problems if we set it to the center position and record it? And what I found was no, the noise is not a problem. Check. Okay, this is recording the shotgun setting. And And now this is the middle setting.
Okay, the output's quite a bit.
What I did in the middle setting was I went ahead and normalized it. Okay, so I hit F2 in Reaper and hit normalize, which pushed the volume up because the overall output of the signal was lower than in the shotgun position.
Lower, but if I get a little closer.
I am not hearing egregious noise here. It's there. Let's turn the volume up and you'll hear it. Okay, now the question becomes, if you're gonna, what if you said, well, that is a problem. Even that little bit of noise is a problem for me. Is there anything you can do about it? Well, there's two things you can do about it. And I can recommend Reaper as a solution only because, and the guys at Reaper, Justin Frankel and his team, you know, I don't get paid for recommending this. But here's the deal. There's really two things you can do to deal with noise if you deem it to be a problem. One is obviously a noise gate, okay? So in Reaper, we've got, if you download Reaper, which you can use for free as long as you want, and if you want to buy it, it's like 60 bucks. And I've been using it for 10 years. I've scored multiple movies with it. I mean, it's a very capable audio workstation piece of software. Okay, so what you would do is one of two things. You would either add the refer or you would add the regate. And I'm going to add them both. Okay? So now we'll get to refer in a moment because refer allows you to do true noise reduction. And by the way, you can do this in Audacity as well. So if you like Audacity and you like destructive audio editing, you can use Audacity to do noise reduction, which I'll demonstrate in a minute. But here's what happens if you put a gate in. Okay, now watch what happens when I kick up the threshold. You can see right here what the noise threshold is. Okay, so I'm going to make it so it's above the threshold, but I'm going to make the release from the threshold pretty long, so that once it gets triggered, it smoothly dies away. Okay? Now I'm going to make it just a smidgen above that. All right? So now I've completely gotten rid of the background noise, and we'll set the volume down here to a more manageable level. And what you'll see here...
Okay, the output's quite a bit lower, but if I get a little closer on the mic, I should have a more well-rounded sound EQ-wise at the cost of slightly lower output. The question is, does it introduce noise?
And as you can see right there, it drops to nothing. Okay, so now you might say, well, okay, but is there anything you can do? Which audio DAC? I'm glad you asked that, Dominic, because it's the crappiest possible. Okay, this microphone is literally just plugged into the dirt cheap audio input in a computer, just like any you might buy off the street. It is not going through a professional audio interface. Okay, that's important to understand, and I'm glad you asked that. In other words, the gain structure, or let's say the amount of noise that's being introduced on this computer, is probably comparable to what you got on your laptop, unless you have a really, really crappy sound card. But for most people, probably not. And if you buy any USB audio microphone, you're going to have a better situation in terms of noise levels. Almost guarantee you. Okay, but what can we do about noise to get rid of it permanently? And I make this point because it's very possible that a guy like Lex Friedman, when he does a podcast, it's possible that the entire audio track is being processed in the following way. He may have a compressor in line. He almost certainly has a noise gate in line. And then there's this additional step that one can consider. Here's what you do. What you're trying to do is you're trying to do a subtractive digital process. So here's my noise. And the theory is this. Can we sample the noise and then digitally subtract the profile of that noise from the entire signal so that it's completely gotten rid of without damaging the sound of the rest of the audio? And it turns out, to a point, you can. If you go too far, it starts to sound like a low bandwidth MP3. It starts to have that sort of underwater sound going on. Okay, but what you do is you put the refer plugin in subtractive mode, and then you're going to automatically build a noise profile. Okay, now we turn it on, and what you can see is that as it's looping over the noise, the plugin is sensing and essentially measuring the frequency content of the noise. If I then turn this sensor action off like that, now what I can do is I can hit Control and drag the whole profile up or down. Okay? And the basic rule is you want to make the noise reduction as gentle as possible. So for me, that's pretty much good enough. So let's compare with it and without it. Pretty big difference. Okay. So now let's grab the whole signal and see what that did to the...
Okay, the output's quite a bit lower, but if I get a little closer on the mic, I should have a more well-rounded sound EQ-wise at the cost of slightly lower output. The question is
it damaging the audio quality? Let's find out. I'm gonna loop this, and what I'm gonna do is keep turning the plug-in on and off, and you can judge for yourself whether it damaged the frequency response of the the recording itself.
Okay, the output's quite a bit lower, but if I get a little closer on the mic, I should have a more well-rounded sound EQ-wise at the cost of slightly lower output. The question is, does it introduce...
Okay, so the really sensitive audiophile might listen to that and hear a tiny difference. Okay, but for most people in most applications, if you apply noise reduction if you feel like you need to, but certainly having a gate in line is going to result in audio that most people are going to go, oh my gosh, it sounds perfect,
Okay, the output's quite a bit lower, but if I get a little closer on the mic, I should have a more well-rounded sound EQ-wise.
We can warm it up a
at the
little
cost
if we
of
want.
slightly lower output. The question is, does it introduce noise? Okay, the output's quite...
So you get the idea. So it's totally possible, but to get really pristine quality audio, and you don't necessarily need super expensive microphones. Now, what I did when I got this request just a little bit ago is I hopped on Amazon and actually purchased the following. What I did was I looked for a USB microphone cable. I think that's what I searched for. And what I found was, and now I can't find it. Let me see if we go back a couple steps here. Yes, this guy right here. I went ahead and bought the thing because I want to test it. I can have it by tomorrow. But this product looks interesting. This is essentially a cable for $12 that is a USB. Essentially, the USB audio device is baked into the chips on the cable. And that means I can take any microphone and plug it in. It probably will not power my 4041, so it's probably not going to give me phantom power. Exactly, Dominic. And what you hear in the highs, the truth is it probably, extremely likely that it doesn't matter. And to your point, by the way, if you wanted to compensate for that, what you would do is just change the ordering of the plugins. So what I would do is do the noise reduction, and then at the end of the signal chain, add the BBE process to restore some highs and lows, like so.
Okay, the output's quite a bit lower, but if I get a little closer on the mic, I should have a more well-rounded sound.
Because now what I'm doing is I'm adding EQ, I'm doing additive EQ, which theoretically ups the noise, but I'm doing the additive EQ to the signal that's already been cleaned up. In other words, the noise isn't there. So it's not going to be as egregious an enhancement if you're doing the enhancement to the signal after it's already been cleaned up. So what you're basically trying to do is just restore some of the quality that was lost as an expense of cleaning up the noise, okay? But the point, getting back to Amazon here, is I'm looking at it and I'm saying, geez, oh Pete, if we can get a USB audio interface for $12, then that opens up the world of you can use any microphone you want. Okay, so to me that's kind of a useful idea. And so that's what I'm going to do, and I'll probably test it with my, I've got a Sennheiser, an AKG. I have an AKG hypercardioid. It's not a shotgun mic, but yet it's a hypercardioid, and it actually has a very warm frequency response, which is pretty unusual for a hypercardioid mic. But so I have my SM58, my Sennheiser, which is kind of comparable to a 58, but it sounds a little different. I got the AKG. I've got the 4041 condenser mic. So those are my quote-unquote professional mics that I have, on the shelf. So I'll test them. But the truth of the matter is, the lion's share of the work I've done for the past quite a few years is using these cheapo $30 Chinese shotgun mics. It's pretty amazing. So I'm going to test this because this is interesting for somebody like me because it means I can use any microphone I want. And see, I know that I can use a little bit of EQ and judicious use of digital tools to make the darn thing sound the way I want to. To wit, the recent episode of Salt and Light that I just posted yesterday, 3/4 of the audio was recorded in the studio with the 4041, and about 1/4 of it was created with the shotgun out here in this different room that's not my studio. And what I did was I just EQ'd the 4041 to basically sound like the shotgun mic. And what the result is that instead of having the 4041 sound be this gorgeous, pristine, perfect audio, it actually sounds a little crappier, but it sits in the mix really nicely. Okay, so Dominic says, I think you can get rid of high-pitched whine if you use a DAC, which often comes with the PAC or the PC sound card. Well, correct. When I did the remote recording of Foley and sound effects, I used an ancient M-Audio Fast Track USB device, which is essentially a pretty okay digital to audio converter with an XLR input. And I just plugged it into an Android device directly. And that's the point I made yesterday, is be aware that most Android devices, if you plug we'll see what happens with this cable I just bought. I'll be interested to see if I plug that into a little adapter that makes it fit the USB jack on the Android device. Does it work out of the box? I have a suspicion that it will, but I don't know yet. I'll have to test that. Okay, so when people look at this, the wrap up here has to do with, well, what does it turn out actually matters. And I think it's important to note that what really matters the most by far, and what you see here with Lex's podcast, is actually not the microphone, not the EQ, not the post-processing, all the stuff everybody wants to talk about, not the digital to audio converters. Nope. It turns out that's not what was actually important. What was really most important all along was the fact that they're 2 inches from the mic. That's the most important thing I want you guys to take away from this. Being close on your mic and not talking into it so you don't get pee pops, but talking past your microphone from 2 or 3 inches, for the most part, makes sound dampening irrelevant. If you're only 2 inches from the microphone, you're not going to hear the room. Now, will you hear it maybe a little bit? Yeah, okay, maybe a little bit. But basically, if you're 2 inches from the mic, sound dampening is not that important. And by the way, if you think about this logically for a moment, if you wanted sound dampening to be relevant, okay, you're 2 inches from the mic and you want, oh, I have to be careful, I showed my address. Oh, gotcha. Yeah, I don't care, dude. That's fine. You guys can come and visit me, I guess, if you want to. Okay, so this is again decidedly non-intuitive. Okay, think about this. If I want to eliminate room noise, I can spend, $1,000 on all kinds of material and put up a bunch of padding in my room, and I can really kill myself trying to eliminate room noise, okay? But think about this for a moment. What if instead what I did was I came up with some little rig that puts a pillow around the microphone? Okay, so there's basically a pillow around the microphone. Now just think about this logically for a moment. What you're trying to do is keep the reflections of the room from getting into the microphone, right? So it isn't the room you actually need to protect, it turns out. It's the microphone you need to protect. And it amazing that it took this long, but just within the last couple of years or something, I saw that somebody came out with a product that does just that, and it's so commonsensical. It's just a little rig that puts the foam padding around the microphone, not around the room. and it effectively keeps the reflections from getting to the microphone. Probably the final thing I would add is that this is only relevant for outdoor recording, but I went and bought some fabric that was a really, really furry carpet. Yeah, blankets, it doesn't matter, anything soft, right? You can use mattress padding. If you're trying to treat walls, you can use egg cartons. The whole point is that you're trying to eliminate both smooth surfaces and parallel surfaces. So the perfect recording room has no walls that are parallel. In other words, the walls are angled a little bit, right? Because that means that when a reflection bounces off the wall, it doesn't keep bouncing back and forth between two parallel walls, which sets up what's called a standing wave. In practice, standing waves are not that big of a danger, actually, especially in small rooms, because in small rooms, the frequency of the standing wave would be quite high. Okay, so the danger isn't actually the standing waves, the danger is actually just the reflections themselves. So you just get that bathroom sound going on. It's a really, really short delay is what it is. It's a slapback delay, if you will, slapback echo. The echo is what gives you the room sound. And when you're recording on a phone, especially if it's got a stereo microphone like we talked about yesterday, then no matter how hard you try, you're going to pick up the room because it's got a microphone on both sides of it, and they're probably both omnidirectional mics. They might be cardioid, but I don't know why they'd make them cardioid. That doesn't make any sense. And that's probably why the audio coming out of a phone still sounds pretty bad, even if you mute one of the channels. Okay, so it's not the stereo ambience of the room that's making it sound bad. It's the fact that each of the two microphones themselves are probably omnidirectional. Well, why would you do that? Well, because if you're trying to sell the idea that a stereo recording is realistic, then you wouldn't want to have have a phone that's got a microphone where all it hears is the ends of the device, right? Because if you wanted to hear something that's in front of you, you wouldn't hear it very well. All you'd hear is what's off to the sides, and all you'd hear coming straight at the phone is the reflection. So I think it's very safe to say that the microphones built into phones are omnidirectional. Therefore, what that means is that a phone is the worst possible thing you could use to directly record audio for any kind of professional application. Because the type of microphone is wrong, it's fairly likely that your distance situation is wrong, because you're probably going to be a foot or so away from it. Most people aren't going to hold the phone right up to their mouth within 2 inches. You want to go, well, okay, well, what are people that are creating a great sounding podcast doing? Well, you saw it. They're 2 inches from the freaking mic, right? So that's the 80-20 rule. The 80-20 rule is get 2 inches away from any cardioid mic that can be fairly cheap, actually, and that's going to solve 90% of your problem. That's the biggest thing you can do to give yourself good quality audio. Okay, quick look at the comments. No worries, Maria. Put a sound damping box around it. Well, box is risky, Tom, because now you're getting into the reflective characteristics of the box itself. Okay, you could get a box that's like a shoebox type of size, maybe 4 inches square or something. And if you put padding in it, okay, so you pad the walls of the box, and then you mount that over top of the microphone, that would be worth testing. That'd be worth looking at. It would just depend. You're trying to eliminate off-axis noise, and the advantage with the cheapo Chinese shotgun microphones is that on the one hand, they really do a good job of eliminating off-axis noise because it's a hypercardioid pattern, but also because they do have this boxy sound, it just saves you a step, because in the post-production stage of the project, it turns out you don't really have to EQ the mic that much in order for the audio to just sit nicely in the mix. It sounds like a show, right? So, if you go and you pull up your favorite movie from the 1990s or something and close your eyes and really, really listen to the audio, you're going to discover that a lot of it sounds very boxy, very thin, very muddy. But in context, your ear accepts it perfectly fine when it's sitting there with the sound effects and the Foley and a little music behind it, and plus you're somewhat sucked into the story. All those things working together cause your ears to not be so picky about audio quality. And conversely, what you would discover is if the audio quality was pristine, you might find it disturbing. Now, more recent films, especially CGI-driven films, where they're literally looping every line in the movie. In other words, they're re-recording all the dialogue. They're not gathering a lot of dialogue on location like movies from, say, the 70s or, whatever. The standards for audio quality on a show are higher than they used to be. You can argue, though, whether that's a good thing or not. To me, it's like I could take it or leave it, and it depends on the show. I've been in a theater with a movie like, I'm thinking maybe it was like Guardians of the Galaxy or something like that, where I could hear them switch from location audio to looped audio, and I mean, it was jolting because the quality of, in the actor saying 2 lines of dialogue, in other words, the same actor where they've got several lines, and you could hear the switch from looped audio to location audio, and you're going, oh my God, this sounds terrible. The audio is amazing. The audio sounds amazing, but the movie sounds terrible. Think about that. The audio is great, the movie sucks. Why? Because of this switching around that's going on. If they would have just kept a consistent sound throughout, quite frankly, pandering to the least common denominator of quality, the overall experience for the viewer would be that the quality was more consistent, actually. So there you go. Let me see here. The low-end echo, and you can get off with a small budget. Well, okay, so low-end, that's what you're, if you look in my studio, what you'd see is, I think that the package cost me about $800 back when I bought it, and it's been 10 years ago, but you can get these large wedge-shaped foam bass traps for the corners, and then you've got large square panels for the flat surfaces of a wall. But what you do with a bass trap is you've got this, you tend to put it in the corners, and what it does is it's almost magical, actually, what it can do to a room, bass traps, because it sucks up that low frequency echo. The thing is, if your surfaces in a room are soft, in other words, if you have treatment on the walls, then bass traps probably aren't necessary. I mean, it's probably overkill for most people. It would become more obvious if you were in a fairly medium-sized room. Like, I'm thinking of Darren T., actually, the little studio he's got set up. That's an environment where I would expect bass traps to maybe be more useful, because I think, if I remember correctly, I think it's a fairly small room. Maybe 8 by 6 foot kind of room. It's not a closet, but it's not a huge... It's not necessarily a studio or a bedroom. Now, I don't really remember, but I'm guessing on that. So clap your hands and get that vibratone sound. There's so many things we could get into about audio. I mean, if you... See, the problem is you can do a lot of things, like you can pink noise a room, but that depends on having, obviously you can generate pink noise with almost any audio program, but you've got to have it coming out of speakers that have a known frequency response, right? Otherwise you can't, well, I guess that is actually the point. So you would need, in that scenario, you got pink noise coming out of your speakers, and then what you're doing is you hold up a really good microphone with a flat response, and it hears what's coming out of the speakers, and you're looking at an equalizer to see where the imbalances are, and then you actually set the EQ to as flat as possible. And what you're doing is effectively tuning the room so that what you physically hear coming out of your speakers is flat, okay? For most people, all of this is overkill. If you want to know how to get a pretty darn good sound out of modest equipment, the key, I'll give you two 80-20s here. The 80-20 of recording audio is to be 2 inches from the microphone and avoid plosives, avoid peepops. That's the 80-20 on the microphone side. on the audio production side, the 80-20 rule is A-B it. In other words, find a show or a movie or a podcast, whatever it is you're comparing to, and you say to yourself, you know what? I don't care that I have crappy speakers. As long as what I'm recording and mixing sounds about the same as the one that I know is professional. In the old days, what we would do is we would put on a CD of a very well-produced album, like, I remember Steve Winwood's Back in the High Life. That was well regarded as a really well-recorded album, right? So you'd put that in your CD player, back when we used CD players, and so it didn't matter what your monitors were, as long as your mix sounded about the same in terms of overall frequency balances. And you can make it even easier today with digital, because you can use plugins like the Reefer to actually see the frequency response of the signal. And that's how modern artificial intelligence-driven song mastering software, that's exactly how it works. It takes a known song with a known general balance of frequencies, and then it just applies it to your song to sort of make your overall mix the same basic frequency response. So is Bruce Sweden, who always likes to talk about how he was there when Michael Jackson recorded Thriller, is a guy like him going to stick his nose up in the air and say, well, I can see a 1.5% difference between your recording and Michael Jackson's Thriller? Well, yeah, Bruce is going to say that. Yeah, absolutely. But does it matter in the real world 99.9% of the time? Nope, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. All the things we've talked about here today will get you there. The biggies are going to be proximity to your microphone, not the expense of your microphone. In the case of the person who emailed me with the question, and by the way, the reason I'm doing this live stream is to just sort of talk through for myself how I'm going to answer their question. They've used a lapel mic, and they've been a little disappointed with the level of echo or whatever. By far, the easiest solution to everything we're talking about is this. No one will debate that when I record these live streams with this cheapo headset, this is like a $15 nothing kind of microphone. Objectively, most people would say that the quality of the audio that comes out of that piece of junk is better than the shotgun mic I'm talking into right now. And the reason they would say that is because, by design, the shotgun mic has that boxy sound, okay? The only reason I'm talking into it right now is because I just didn't bother to switch microphones before I went live yesterday, and then I still haven't bothered yet today. And plus, in this case, I wanted to show the difference between the shotgun. So if I switch this microphone right now, you're going to hear the audio quality improve, but the level drop. Okay? So now I'm basically in podcast mode, right? So now I'm doing what Lex does. I'm 2 inches away from it, and the overall level went down, and you guys are probably noticing that the overall frequency response probably sounds better. Okay, can anybody put something in the chat to confirm that that is basically what you're hearing? And now when I switch it back to here, I can back off of the microphone. Okay, if it seems muffled, well, okay, fine. That might be because of my distance from it or whatever. Okay, yeah, that's kind of weird. Obviously, what I recorded here was what you just said sounded muffled. Is this?
Okay, the output's quite a bit lower, but if I get a little closer on the mic, I should have a more well-rounded sound EQ.
So it could be that the little bit of EQ, is kind of helping this pop a little better or whatever. So, but we'll leave it at that for the moment. And you say it sounds warm, so that's what I would have expected. The basic difference is the output goes down, but the overall sound is a little warmer. Okay, so for my friend who asked this question, their easiest solution for doing interviews or podcasts or whatever is going to be something like this. Just get a freaking headset, because that naturally forces the microphone to be an inch from your mouth. Problem solved. And by the way, do you notice like preachers preaching, the microphones they tend to use nowadays mount on their ear, and then the microphone comes to about halfway down their cheek. And that is going to be a directional microphone. It's kind of pointed at their mouth, but their mouth is actually talking away from it. And for live speaking, that tends to give a pretty darn good sound, and doesn't tend to foster feedback and all the rest. So, okay. So there we go. That's the discussion about audio. The answer for me is undetermined. I'm going to get this USB to microphone jack from Amazon, because for $12, why not? We'll give it a try. And if that solves the problem, then we can be more flexible about what specific microphone we plug into it. If you want the simplest solution for podcasting or whatever, you're probably not going to go to one of these Chinese shotgun mics, because it's going to give you too boxy of a sound that you're not going to like. And I won't take the time right now to show how you can use EQ and whatnot to take this boxy sound.
Okay, the out.
Check. Okay, this is record. And I could warm it up. Like I could fool you into going, okay, that's pretty darn close to the warm sound that we all love, right? For a TV show, don't need it. I want the boxy sound. I want this focus around 600 to 1,000 hertz that makes it sit in the mix nicely in a show context. So Dominic says, what helps a lot is by watching videos about the mics you want to buy. Absolutely, and look at the reviews too. I'm still somewhat baffled though. I don't know if Amar is still here, but I'm still baffled by what I heard yesterday. I'm truly, actually, I'm going, wait, this really got me confused. I don't get it. And so let me get back to what I started to say at the beginning of the live stream today. This is what I think's going on. Blue has figured out how to create a microphone that they should probably be selling for $40, okay? And they figured out, well, we could sell this particular model for $100 by advertising the fact that it's got 4 polar patterns, okay? So then what they did was, there's a lot of engineering that goes into designing a polar pattern. There's a reason why if you look at a shotgun mic, it's got these slices out of it. It's got like all the way down. That's part of the physical and mechanical engineering of it that actually causes the lack of off-axis response. It's what causes it to only hear in front of itself instead of the side. Okay, so there's physical engineering in a microphone that fosters a polar pattern that's amazing. So the question then becomes, how do you take a microphone that basically looks like my wallet, it's about this size or maybe a little bigger, and how do you give it 4 different polar patterns? Cardioid, omni, bidirectional, and maybe, I don't remember what the 4th one was, maybe hypercardioid, but how do you do that? My suspicion is that they did lab tests and they figured out with some minor engineering of the mechanics around the microphone diaphragm that they were able to show in a lab setting that the polar pattern is a little more similar to cardioid or a little more similar to bidirectional, and because of that, they're promoting the microphone as being a 4 polar pattern microphone, when in fact the physical engineering of it probably isn't even close to replicating a professional cardioid or a professional bidirectional polar pattern. Now, I don't know that to be true, but I speculate that it's just marketing hype so we can sell that microphone for $100 when the bare bones of the microphone is omni, which it would have to be, because how do you take a microphone that can hear all around itself? There's really only one way you could do that, and that would be to actually have multiple microphone elements inside the casing. And that would be a legitimate approach, but of course that's going to raise the cost, because they have to have, maybe 3 or 4 different elements in the microphone. They're all stacked, and then what you're actually just doing is switching between them, right? So you're not really changing the polar pattern, you're actually changing the microphone, and it's all just hidden in a casing. That's the type of thing we're probably dealing with here. So when Amar switches his microphone from omni to cardioid, he's switching from a true omni to a sort of cardioid that's probably not that great, that still has off-axis response that's way higher than what you would expect from a professional cardioid mic. That's what I suspect, because at this point, without more information, I don't have any other way to judge what I heard in that recording. In the cardioid setting, I was hearing way, way more room, noise, and reflection than you would hear from any cardioid mic, especially if you're only a couple inches from it. To me, it was just baffling. I was thrown for a loop. So that's not a judgment against Amar or anything. I mean, I I'm just like, wait, the Omni recording and that he said was like the mic was above his head versus the cardioid recording 2 inches from his mouth sounded principally the same. I mean, there was a little difference, but not enough to shake a stick at. Yeah, Dominic, oh no, Amar took the recordings down. Sorry about that. Yeah, he posted audio clips on Discord. But then after everybody sort of listened to him and, I sort of passed judgment, he took them down. So, Amar, have you made any headway in investigating what was going on there to where you've been able to get a better sound out of it? It seems bizarre to me that you'd have a blue microphone. The thing that's jumping out to me as being suspect is a relatively cheap microphone that's able to switch between 4 polar patterns. To me, that is suspect. That tells me that that's marketing hype, and in fact, the actual mic performance in regard to its polar patterns is probably not even close to what you would expect from a professional result. Now, there are microphones out there. I can't remember if it was AKG. We're talking about condenser microphones that are, getting up into the Neumann class that are used in high-level studios that do have the ability to switch between cardioid and bidirectional. I can't remember, but they're multi-$1,000 microphones. Today, I will say this: the technology has advanced. It really started about 20 years ago. Yeah, okay. Well, the only reason I bring it up, Amar, is because I kind of feel bad for you, because I would think you'd want to be able to get a better sound out of that freaking microphone, And if they use that mic for the podcast, then what I heard almost sounds like something's wrong. Like it literally could be a defective mic, actually, that's stuck in a single polar pattern. I mean, I would look into that because I did not hear the clean, crisp, tight sound that I would expect out of any garden variety cardioid mic that somebody's only 2 inches from. So that was a little odd for me. So anyway, that's it about audio. And since this went one heck of a lot longer than I expected, but it's been a rich conversation, I think I'm going to go ahead and continue with some work. And maybe they do it like the U87 in a cheap way without the engineering behind it. Well, I don't know what the engineering is on the U87. Is the U87, can you switch the polar patterns in the U87? If so, there could be two ways. There could be two things that are at play. Let me think about this. The U87. Let me pull up Krita here, so people know what the heck we're talking about. This is really maybe boring as watching paint dry to some people, but it's interesting to me. When you look at the Neumann U87 or a similar class of microphone. Okay, so you got a microphone that looks like this, and the mics that you can buy for podcasting on Amazon that are USB mics for somewhere between $30 and $300 pretty much look like this. Okay, now the Neumann, I believe the actual construction is circular. Okay, it's a cylinder, and then you got this part above it that's the pop filter. And so what's really going on here is that inside of this pop filter, there's this thing. This is actually the sensor. Okay, so there's a very, very delicate membrane in there, and this is very, very thin. And by the way, when we were talking about condensers versus dynamic microphones, the difference has a lot to do with this membrane. The membrane is what's responding, so audio comes across and vibrates the membrane. Okay, so then the question becomes, well, how do you get the signal from the membrane into the audio, the electrical audio signal channel? Okay, if the membrane is really, 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 really thin, okay, super, super sensitive, okay, then it's going to be extremely sensitive to very low level sound, and it's also going to be very sensitive to very high frequency sound. Okay, so this membrane in the Neumann U87 is extremely sensitive. So we're saying that the the condenser mechanism, and you guys can correct me, Dominic, if I'm talking out my hiney and I'm wrong about this, you can clarify. But what's really going on here is that the signal that is very, very small, very, very gentle, in terms of what it can be sensitive to, is what I mean by gentle. In other words, it hears everything. The signal is quite small, and so the condenser mechanism, which is powered, then is able to translate that vibration into an electrical signal, and the signal remains very, very low, but yet it's so sensitive that you can have a mic level input and still have a nice audible signal, which means that the noise inherent in that signal chain is also extremely low, unless there's noise that's in the room itself. Okay, so I was going to ask you that, Dominic, so thank you for posting that. So he's saying that they have two capsules that are behind each other. Okay, so what that means is, in a microphone, you might have a condenser element here, and then you got a second condenser element here, and they're basically pointing in two different directions. This one's pointing out, and this one's pointing this way. Okay, so when you have a switch on the microphone to switch between cardioid and bidirectional, all you're actually doing is just physically turning off one of the elements, basically. I would guess, you know. If you want to go, if you want to go hypercardioid with a shotgun mic, with a shotgun, the element in a shotgun mic is typically actually back a little ways in the capsule, and that's why you have these ports. You've got this porting on the side, and I can't explain the physics of it. I used to know back in my college days, but there's reasons why when they put these ports, which changes, I suppose, the actual air pressure levels in the cap or in the cylinder, causes the actually, because of the ports, it would also cause reflection inside the port itself. The sound would bounce around and actually be distracted, and plus that would eliminate the sort of echoey closed-in sound that you have by having the capsule buried in a cylinder, right? So the sound comes in this way, but you reject this off-axis sound, and the net result is the thing only hears in front of itself, kind of thing, right? So, but yeah, thanks, Dominic, for clarifying that. So it could be that, at least in the U87 specifically, this isn't quite how it works. The thing I was going to say about the difference between dynamics is it's not apocryphal, but it's legendary that Barbra Streisand only records with ribbon microphones. And a ribbon microphone kind of combines the best of both in that, and I believe a ribbon microphone needs a larger power supply than a condenser mic, actually. Condenser mics require 40 volts, so there you go. An electric condenser obviously uses a battery and transforms 1.5 volts into 40 volts. But with a ribbon microphone, you've got a larger diaphragm that's extremely sensitive, but it moves a little slow. You know, it's kind of like a wave billowing in the wind. And what happens is you get the high frequency sensitivity of a condenser, but you also get this sort of smoothing out of the sound because the membrane physically just doesn't move as quickly because it's very large. And so you get this really unique warm sound. And as I say, I've heard that Barbra Streisand will only record with ribbon mics. And ribbon mics fell out of fashion years and years and years and years ago because they're really delicate, they're easy to break, they're extremely expensive, yada, yada, yada. So down the chain it goes. So I don't know if anybody finds all that information useful, but they all use, I'm sorry, I said 40 volts, I meant 48. So a condenser has to have 48 volt power, and if it's, as I say, an electric condenser, then what that means is that you've got to transform the voltage from a battery up to 48 volts so that the condenser will work. A USB mic, absolutely, Golden Slime is correct. Are they? Okay, so, I don't know. Thank you, Dominic. I have never heard, other than recordings of Barbra Streisand, I've never heard a ribbon mic live in a studio situation. And I'm sure they're very, very beautiful sounding. By contrast, a condenser, you know, your Neumanns, they just combine this wonderful high frequency response, transient response. They're extremely responsive to transients because they respond faster. Okay, and that's really the big difference between a dynamic mic. A dynamic mic is a dynamic mic is able to deal with higher sound pressure levels, but at the same time the diaphragm is moving more slowly. It's not going to be as responsive to high frequencies. Now it is good enough, right? But she had a small hand. I don't know about that one. On Judy Garland. I have not ever looked into what she sang into. So anyway, with that, I am going to move forward. I'm not quite sure what my recommendation is going to be to the people who inquired, but I'm going to test that. I'm going to test that USB to mic input with various microphones and see what the noise, basically what the noise level is. The DAC converter, the analog to digital, digital to analog converter is a real question. And so kind of by extension, how noisy is the preamp is really kind of the hot question there. So let's see what we have here. I guess I'll put this on the large display so I don't have to worry about remembering to switch screens. What time is it? 11:42. All right, so this looks pretty good. Pretty happy with what I'm seeing here. Yeah, we got an eye blink in there. Maybe could probably use a little more. Okay, so do I want to, I don't know. I mean, basically my eye is pretty well focused where it needs to be on the characters here. I'm not thinking too much about the background. So I think this could stand to be defocused a bit, especially up where the grass is. And I'm not sure that, let me take a look at that shot. That is, this is kind of an interesting shot too, come to think of it. There's sort of a pastel character to the colors that I'm not totally in love with. So let's look at 435. I have a suspicion we're in Krita's land again. .435. Yeah, okay, and this is pretty long. Okie dokie. Let's go back to the beginning. Oh, holy crap, did I do that? To quote Steve Urkel, did I do that? Looks like I packed a bunch of shots. I did. 435 is a long shot. Well, that's okay. That means everything's in one place, I guess. Okay. Well, I guess the good news is that means anything I do in this shot to punch up the backgrounds, I can just copy them over and... Wow, I'm impressed. I did not realize I did this. All right, so I'm going to hit the... Look at this and go ahead and render this right now just because I want to bake the render settings into the Krita file, and now I'm looking on the preview to see what the format is. And these are JPEGs. Okay, so let's come back here, and it's already set to JPEG because of the last one. And so it should complain, and it did. And now the only reason I'm rendering it is so that those render settings are baked into the shot. And then I can save my work, and 435 is good to go. So this whole sequence with the couple that gets rejected, basically the gist here is that the couple is told that they can't come in to see the wedding because they're not nobles, right? So there's, I guess, a little social commentary going on there. Okay, question. is it important? This is, yeah, okay. Let's look at how long this goes on. We got 1, 2, it's only 2 seconds. So the question I was asking myself is, should I have the people in the background walking? And I say no. Your tension is on these guys, and so it isn't important that these characters in the background are actually moving along. It's only on the screen for 2 seconds. So he stops them, and they're cheery because they're going to see the wedding. And now they're a little baffled because, wait, we're not allowed in? And the guard makes it clear that because they're not nobles, they're not allowed in. Okay, a little tween there would be nice. So we did a blink. I think so. I'm going to add a 1-frame tween just to punch that up a little bit. So I would guess these 2 frames can be offset like that, and then yeah, this is the characters, so I'm just going to basically do a real basic liquefy. Okay, that didn't work. I need a smaller range here. Okay, just enough to sell the idea that their heads are moving without it distorting too much, to get us from here to here. That definitely smoothed it out a bit. Now, obviously, Salt and Light has a little bit of a choppy, almost stop motion-y character to it. Okay, and now what I want to do is I actually want to try to split the difference here just a little bit. This I may regret. I have to... Whoops. Oh, come on now. Krita. Okay. Since I started using my stylus, this may not really make a lot of sense on the face of it. What I'm trying to do is just find a... Yeah, that doesn't work because you can't have one thing move and not the other, so... Yeah, I think I'm going to skip that. That's probably kind of stupid. Okay, and I need to do redo because I inadvertently just... Ah, great. Redo doesn't work. Seriously, dude? Okay. That's annoying. So I have to redo this. So I'm just going to try to maybe do a little better job of splitting the difference. This is a 1-frame tween, okay? So I'm not trying to... Okay, yeah. So let's extend the beard a little bit. I'm using my mouse, by the way, right now, so it's a little... I'm just going to try to do a slightly better job on this tweening, just to get from here to here. Yep. Okay, and then with the woman... I'm going to try to open this up a little bit more. What I'm looking for with the liquefy tool is I'm looking for the sweet spot in the settings where the deformation of the character actually looks like almost like a normal movement. Okay. Let me think about this. So we're always going to get into this perennial debate of, well, why not just redraw it, right? So, and of course, in this case, the answer is because I don't want to. That actually looks pretty good, other than, frankly, you know, yeah, probably. I'm thinking about the fact that ideally her head would have been drawn a little differently through all these shot. But, so, this is one of those things where the animation purist might be getting irritated with me because I'm being a little bit too much of a pragmatist. Just like, hey, whatever kind of sort of looks kind of sort of good. Okay, so here, the other thing I want to do actually is I want to close this in a little bit. Yeah, okay, so now this, what I'm going to do is actually select this, make this selection, Control C, and then go to the previous frame, hit delete, and then Control Shift V to paste that fix into the other frame. So now I should have a pretty, oh my, look at that, that's not good. I blew it. I blew it. I didn't quite get it right. So let's grab a bigger piece. Control C. Delete. Control V. Ah! Sorry. Control Shift V. There we go. That's pretty smooth. That's pretty smooth. That actually got me there, folks. I cannot complain. Whoa, bunch of comments. Dynamic mics basically have a small speaker they use in reverb. Right, exactly. Yep. Sound like a variable condenser you'd use in electronics. Nice. Thank you for that technical explanation. All right, let's go back to the beginning of the shot here. Okay, yeah. Let's go through, and now we're going to start looking for opportunities to inexpensively reduce the degree of choppy animation. Okay. First thing I think I'll do is turn off the background and save my work. Okay, so now we're saved. So what we're going to do is, I do tend to favor liquefy only because it allows me to introduce as little distortion. Well, okay, let me rephrase what I'm trying to say here. The easiest way to fix what we have right here is to do a careful job like that. Hit the A key, let's anchor the center point on the guy's neck, and then just move him a little bit. Okay? So the downside to that approach, of course, is now we have some cleanup to do. There is a way, though, watch this. This is worth the price of admission today. Here's a trick. All right? I have the selection, right? I'm going to go Control-Shift-I. Now I just reversed the selection. So now everything except the guy's head is selected. So now if I take the liquefy tool, I can actually modify the stuff that's left to patch the hole as seamlessly as possible. Okay? Get it? That was... Okay, now that did not work. And that's my fault because it's too much distortion. Okay? So let's just look at this. Yes, okay. So I need to do a better job. So I definitely need to decrease the range of this. And of course you could paint it too, but yeah, so I guess we just learned the hard way that if you're going to use this technique, you want to make your fixes as non-disruptive as possible. Now that probably is going to look pretty good. Hit Control-Shift-A. I saw this somewhere yesterday. If you have a selection and for some reason you want to remember that selection, there's multiple ways you can do it in Krita, but one way you can do it is to add local selection. And what that does is it essentially creates a plugin where you could actually toggle between multiple selections. So like if I go like this, Control Shift I, and then I go add local selection. I assume this is going to work. There's selection 1. Okay, it didn't work because it didn't reverse it, so I have to redo this. All right, so there's a local selection. Now I go back to the character. I activate the local selection, go back to the character. Now if I hit Control Shift I, I'm not seeing that change. So that might not work for reversing a selection, which is kind of stupid, but let's hit invert selection specifically here and see what happens. I'm not seeing that little flash that I expected. So we grab this selection, Control Shift I, and now I'm going to actually, yeah, see, it didn't work. So, okay, so my kudos to Krita are withdrawn for that particular feature, because the fact that you can't invert a selection and then resave the inverted version of it is kind of stupid. Okay, so now what we need to do is kind of reverse this. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing again. Here I'm going to be a little more subtle with it. I'm just going to move this a little bit like that. Okay, and so now what we need to do is whip his mouth back into shape. Yep, there we go. So now that's interesting. I really want to see a pause. I don't like his acting. Mr. Soldier, you're moving around too much, friend. I think what I'll do is grab these cells, push them back. I'm going to grab these 6 cells, push them forward. Oops. That's all feel. And I do see the problem, by the way, in the shadow. That works. I like that better. Okay, so problem in the shadow. If you look closely, right here, there's a problem. That's okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm on the mouth layer. No wonder I'm getting confused. I don't know. I don't know if that's actually a problem. Ah, there it is. Oh, I'm sorry. I was getting confused because it was jumping back. Wait, is it? Let me see here. Yeah, when it loops back to the beginning, you're in this position with a different shadow. But playing it forward, you're never gonna notice that in a million years. You only notice it if it loops and you see that the shadow on this pose is not exactly the same as the shadow on this pose. See what I mean? So, but if you're just going forward, you would never think about that. All right, so now he pops out of the way as the other guy comes through. And obviously that's a little cheese ball. Of course, we got the 1-frame tween there on the head flip. I'm just deciding on the fly here what's acceptable and what's not. Some of it's acceptable, some of it's not acceptable. End key. This is my actual size right here. You know, not bad, actually. Let's go to here. The only thing I don't like, okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a chance here. Let's save our work. What I want to do is get right now he's skewed, okay? His head is becoming skewed because of the liquefy operation, so I'm going to see if I can fix that. And by the way, actually, let me show you guys. Let me show you a way that might help with if you're gonna do a rotation, okay, in Krita. Sometimes using the cage transform is useful. Okay, so let's show an example of that. I'm gonna switch this to cage, and then what it lets you do is I can basically create a region, okay? So effectively that region becomes a selection. But then if I select these, okay, and I put the mouse outside of it, look what happens. You're starting to get that idea that you kind of wish you could do in Krita with rotation. It's about as close as it gets. Now I'm going to hit undo because I actually don't want this one selected. So look at that. And it's the same thing I've said using like Blender and other tools is if the overall feeling of the movement when you just wiggle it around feels kind of natural, then you're probably going to get a good result in your animation. So I'm going to go with that. The problem is that Krita does not have a good way to remember the settings. Let's see here. I'm going to take a chance of blowing Krita up, so I'm going to save my work. But it could be you're not going to be able to put animation keys in a cage transformation, okay? But you can use a transform mask so that it at least remembers the settings, okay? So same situation here is I'm going to create the cage. Well, actually, there's another problem. There's no point in doing this because the other problem is that if you do a transformation and bake it, there's no way to actually take the transform mask, bake it into that one frame of animation, but still remember the settings. You could kind of kludge your way around it by having a transform mask that's like down here and not attached to anything, and you just keep copying it back in. But, you know, it sort of becomes more hassle than it's worth kind of thing. So I hope that kind of makes sense, guys. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to whoops, that's not what I wanted to do. I want to go back to liquefy here. And now I'm going to do some very judicious tweaks to try to just smooth this out a little bit. You know, just take my time and dial it in. Okay, so now here we've got that skewing I was talking about. Now, as you can see, Krita keeps forgetting the size of the liquefy brush. If I change it over here, it'll remember from invocation to invocation. So right there is pretty close to what I want, something like that. Okay, and I want to, just like doing any tweening, I want to just keep jumping between the frames so that I can kind of feel whether it's working or not, or whether I'm doing more harm than good. This line right here, I have no idea what that is, but that's probably an artifact, actually. That's an artifact from when I did the cage transform, which is a little disappointing. That's all right. Okay, yeah, look at that. Look how skewed that is. Okay, so does he move? He does not. So therefore, what we'll do is we'll do the same thing we did before. Let's make a selection. You can just see, by the way, right there, you saw Krita doing a autosave, and it's pretty seamless. So I'm going to hit Control-C. And then here, what I'm going to do is hit Delete. Control-Shift-V to paste that in. And as you can see, we have a little problem, so I'm going to hit Alt, actually the S key and then Alt to take the villager out of the selection. All right. So Control-C and now Control-Shift-V. Now I want to see if there's any chatter because I didn't delete it first. Looks like I'm okay. All right, looks like I'm good. So there's that. All right. So let's loop it and see what we got. Oh yeah, that looks way better. Oh my gosh, these are big improvements. Okay, there's a little bit of a... Yep, this tween here I do not like, so let me... Yeah, because really where he ends up is a rotation, and so it feels like, you know, you know, rubber hose animation or something. It's too squash and stretchy. So I am going to delete this key on the character. And we're going to try this again. And, oh heck, let's give it a try. Let's just try this. This is risky, but it probably won't work. No, that won't work. There's going to be way too many artifacts. No way that's even going to come close to working. So, forget it. So what I want to do is just keep it simple, Sherlock. That's really actually all I want to do. And then I'll just patch the hole. That's going to look way smoother, I bet. Yeah, that's like 10 times better. Okay. Now we just have to go in and clean up the mess. Clean up the mess, friends. Okay. Nothing here. Let's go to the tab key so we can actually work a little bigger. Okay. Quick cleanup, friends. Quick cleanup. B key. I think I have my standard pencil that I'm using right now. What do we have here? I actually think I'm going to use my technical drawing pen so that it definitely gives me a solid coverage. Just patch the holes. Patch the holes. No big deal. It's fairly forgiving. It's one frame tween. Where was that one bit? Oh, right there. Yeah, that's pretty awful. That's pretty objectionable, friends. But if you're going to try to leverage your drawings, then this is what you get. You got to deal with a certain amount of artifact cleanup. Well worth it. Tab key. Save our work. Looks like it's auto-saving anyway. So we've got that stupid problem. So I'm switching away from Krita to something else, and it fixes itself. All right, so let's just look at this. Oh yeah, boy, I'm liking this way better. Okay, so let's hit Control R, and let's render the whole darn thing out and see how it's looking in the show. In the show, my friends, in the show. How we doing on time? Hour and a half, man. I really did not expect to be live streaming animation this morning, but by gum, why not? I did want to kind of work through the audio stuff because, I mean, I know nowadays everybody's got a reason why they're wanting to record good quality audio. And frankly, People are recording stuff into their phones all the time, and there is no worst case scenario. If what you want is quality in your audio recording, and by the way, to be fair and clear and complete, I have never once recorded anything into a phone where when I went and listened to it in a good system that it sounded good. Never. I've never gotten a good recording out of a phone. I've come kind of close by being real close with my mouth to one of the microphones, but other than that, hopeless. Hopeless, hopeless, hopeless. Look at that. That is tight, baby. Oh, I like it. These are subtle changes, subtle improvements, but they're very there's just no question it's kind of raising the bar here a little bit. Getting rid of some of that choppiness. All right, I'm going to take a couple minute break. I need to like get a banana or something. And so I guess we will loop this, and I will be back in just a few minutes. But yeah, like I need like a banana, or I'm starting to bunk a bit. Okay, back in 5. And I am back. And let's keep rocking. Did a 3D camera pencil test on paper. I think it looks too technical. You watch it later and comment. What do you think? Need more character. Did you post that on the Discord? 3D camera pencil test. I'm gonna jump over there, just assuming that you're talking on Discord. I'm not seeing it. So yeah, posted where would be the question. Posted where? Oh, on YouTube? Okay. I gotta look you up. Hang on a second. Okay, got it. Videos, pencil test, 3D camera move. Okay, so this is what Dominic's talking about. Oh, come on now. You guys can see all my various kinds of politics and crap I watch. Yeah, it's easy. The what's missing is it's a good 3D rotation. But what's missing is there is no character movement within that camera move. The only thing you animated was the camera. So like right here, perhaps, boom. As the camera's coming around, maybe her head looks down or something, and then as it goes around her, maybe she looks up, and then maybe as the camera's pulling out, she starts walking or something. That's more work, you know. So the walking isn't necessarily that important, but so good job on the 3D turnaround, and then just right now you've got a 3D camera turnaround on a mannequin is what you have. So you're going to have to bake some movement into the character itself, preferably with some pauses. So she would not go like this. You know, you don't just move her around for no reason. She would be still, but then she'd change, and then maybe change again, right? So just a couple changes with maybe one frame tweens in there or so that show that she's thinking, you know, that there's something going on with the character. But the actual 3D move was quite nice. Anyone disagree, they're, you know, weigh in on the chat. Okay, so, you know, and I see this stuff in my work all the time where, like, for example, here, we've got a large scene here that's everything's baked in, right? So if I make any changes, it sort of upset the overall balance. And so then I have to make this calculus of whether I try to make those changes, but make it all fit into the same space, which is, you know, a good editing problem to have to solve. You know, in television, you have to solve that all the time because the show has to come out to an exact length. That's a good thing. That's good for your discipline, right? But like right here, sorry, that's not supposed to be looping. Boom, boom. Okay, so there are reasons why it almost makes more sense to have his head turn later. So the problem we have right here, and actually I think I'm going to do this. So watch what I'm going to do here. I'm going to say, let's say his head turns here. If his head's going to turn here, then what I want to do is I want to take this head, and the characters walking in the silhouette, I think, are in the same layer. They are. So that's a little bit of a problem, but we can work with that. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this out, and then I'm going to go back to here. I'm going to hit Control C, and then here I'm going to cut it out, and I'm going to leave it there. Okay, so Control C, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste this pose back into each of these frames so that his head turn happens. So in other words, he's noticing the people walking up. Okay, now I would say I should have done that one frame sooner, because it cuts away a little too quickly after he turns his head. So that was a bit of a mistake. So I want to shift this back one frame. So here we've got this. It's good there. So this is what we're going to use. So I'm going to go S and grab this. Control C, copy that to the clipboard, and then go back to this previous frame, delete it, and then Control Shift V to paste that pose back in there. And now I've time shifted that. That worked. That basically worked. It keeps everything kind of clipping along, you know, boom, 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 boom. Okay, so here they come up. You could really maybe even make, I'm going to try this. I don't know if this is going to work, but actually, let's not even do a selection. I'm just going to do a liquefy on this one. Okay, so all I'm going to do is just put a little tiny shift here. It's very, very, very small. Whoops, we don't want to change the size of the hat. And the only reason I'm doing that is just to suggest a little bit of life here in the character after the other people walk up. No, that did not work. So I'm going to get rid of that frame. I didn't think that would work actually, but I figured it was worth a try. Yeah, that slight move on his part is fine. In fact, I would even say maybe a little shift of weight right there and a tiny shift of weight right there might be okay too. Yeah, because he is responding to them. Bloomp, boom. Okay, so now this is all pretty questionable. Yeah, that's all pretty jerky, isn't it? And we'll just review this from here to here. I mean, I guess in this case it actually works okay. That's all right. I think I'm going to go ahead and pop this. That's not what I wanted. Okay. Krita set the first and last frame for me when I didn't really want her to. Did I just say her? Krita's a her, apparently. Got your last message there, Dominic. Cool. All right, let's go back here, kind of see how things are flowing. Yeah, that all goes by so quick it doesn't matter. It's all good. Okay, one thing I did want to do though, however, is I wanted to do a mod to the background painting, this one, to essentially, let me see, let's hit the B key, and I don't have it on my hot list, so let's go to brush presets, and I want the old the old Q-tip. All right. Whoa, that's a little extreme, isn't it? Turn the opacity way the heck down and see what that does. Okay, that I think did the trick. And now I'm going to just make some very judicious changes just to soften that up a little bit. Okay, so now I assume it's here. Yes. We're going to take this, control drag, same shot right there, control drag. Yep, and there it is again. Control drag. There we go. Control R, and then I think we are done with 435, at least for now. That is one long sequence. Save it. Yeah, that just a little less distraction there in the background. Whoops. Okay, now we've got trouble. Let's go to 444. I have no idea if we're still in Creta land or if we're switching to Tahoma. Not a clue. 434. I'm sorry, that's wrong. That's 444. Well, shows as being a Creta. Let's have a look here. Okay, yeah, this is pretty awful. I don't know if I'm up for this right now. It's been 2 hours. I think I'm going to bail. This is... I mean, it's not horrible, but it's not really good enough kind of thing, you know what I mean? So there are cases where that type of a walk on the part of the soldier would be okay, but it basically looks stupid. He doesn't look regal enough or whatever. He's jerking around too much. Let's see. So there's oh, okay, I see what happened here. And that's her body. There's the soldier. So there he is. Let's go to, whoops, let's go to a key. Okay, let's think about this. Yeah, just leaning forward like that doesn't work. Again, too much of a well, we'll see what this does. It might be okay. He's just really bouncing around too much, I think. It's not a proper walk cycle, and I don't claim that it is, or that I really made much of an effort to try to make it so. That might be kind of okay. Let's just see what the overall... see, that looks a lot better. Yeah, that looks a lot better. We are talking about a shot that goes by in a second and a half, and it just gets them over to the tent, so... Lump, 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 lump. And generally speaking, I would say my... You know, when I look at this shot, my attention is pretty much focused around their heads. So that's where all the jerking was. I'm not looking at their feet, in other words. You could criticize the animation on the feet, no doubt about it. But when I'm looking at the shot, I'm not looking at their feet. I'm looking at their heads, their faces. And now the movement's a little more convincing. Now, could Fala be less jerky? Absolutely. Let's go to Fala. So the problem we have with Fala is we need to marry these two levels together. So let's go Control E and just commit to that right now. And so what we have is we've got, well, she's on this foot, so we'll just put a tiny move there. And then we're letting her shift. I'm just going to put in these little intermediate moves just to see if it kind of works. So I'm anchoring that on her toe. So it's still going to be a bit of a jerky walk, but it's going to be smoothed out with just some suggested movement, basically, in between the keyframes. So this is economical animation for sure. Yeah, she's making a little bit too much of a jump there in each of these intermediate frames. So let me, gosh. Okay, that actually worked. So we're going to let her slide. Yep, we're going to let her slide a little bit and see if we can get away with that. So we're actually deliberately letting the feet slide a little bit in the interest of favoring slightly smoother movement overall. So there she's kind of anchored on that foot, which would mean tiny slide, tiny slide. Better. Save our work. This is 444. I gotta look at the show and see what the sequence is. This is a JPEG sequence. Okay, let's come back here. And now my question, of course, is where is the soldier in the foreground? Is that him? Oh, it is. Yes. Okay, one thing we could consider here, let me see what this is. That's interesting. It does help them sit in the mix a little bit better, doesn't it? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and commit to this group. So let's merge the group. And we'll save our work. Okay, so now the reason I merged the group is I want to see what happens if we go to our layer styles. And what I want to do is put a stroke around these characters. Okay, so obviously that's obnoxious. This should be a 1 pixel stroke probably. Yeah, probably a 1 pixel stroke is all you need. Let's see what happens if we go to 2. Oh, somebody's knocking on the door. Sounds like the postman. Or, nope, that's Kyle. Hang on a second, folks. Did you cut your hair off? Looks like you cut your hair. Okay. So this color needs to be a little gentler. Okay, I think that will help them pop a bit. If we turn that off, oh, sorry, turn that off. We'll give that a crack. Control R. We've got the soldier back in there. We got them slightly color corrected, yada, yada, yada. Okay, exactly what I thought. It was sitting here dreading that this was going to happen. Yep, I'm sure I know what happened. Krita, I'll betcha. Nope, it says it's JPEGs, and that's 435. Okay. My bad. My fault. I did not change this. This is supposed to be 444, so that means that the last shot is going to have to be re-rendered. That was silly. If you guys are drawing a blank and not knowing what the heck I'm talking about, I need to immediately bring back up shot number 435 and re-render it because I inadvertently just rendered over the first 24 frames of this whole sequence. Haven't done that too many times, but no big deal. No big deal. All right, so now we've gotten, let's see how this looks. Not bad. I'm not sure how I feel about that shot. That's pretty sloppy. Okay, yeah, I'd say this is a good time to take a break. If we jump over to here, sorry. Sorry, jump over here. What have we accomplished here, friends? Well, we have got not bad. 22 seconds of show punched up. That's cool. That is cool. And we are making good headway here on Webisode 6. Are we? Well, here's the beginning. And we're going to be going to... Where are we going to be going to? I was thinking that I was going to go until this point right here where Vespar shows up. If I do that, that's 6 minutes. That's probably not too bad. So, there it is. Friends, I am ready to call it a session and go, I think, lift some weights, as I do most every day. And so with that, I will sign off and say, hey guys, you know that there will be more later. Everyone have a good afternoon.